Hello everybody, welcome to your second day of Miraculous University, and technically your first official day. Last time was just the first day of school, the basics, the get to know you. Today's all the juicy stuff. Okay, we're actually learning today. Are you guys excited? I'm so excited. We actually have yet another slideshow. I think I mentioned this in the introduction video, but I think almost every single episode will have one. Anyway, this one's actually 74 slides long, so we might be here for a while. I think we can get through it pretty quickly, but I wasn't lying when I said this is actually going to be a podcast and it's going to be podcast length. I mean it. Anyways, thank you everyone for coming to class today. And with that being said, let's get into the topic. So, the first official topic for today, we are going to be discussing Lukagami versus Feligami. Now, mind you, I am fully aware that Feligami is canon and Lukagami is not. So some of you may be like, well, why are we talking about this? Why are we having this debate if, one is canon and one isn't? It's so obvious, we don't really need to argue about it. Well, I would disagree, because still to this day, I see people aren't arguing about which one is going to be canon. They're arguing why Lukagami should have been canon over Feligami. I feel like everyone just always says, oh, Feligami is so stupid, it should have been Lukagami, it should have been Lukagami. And that is why I want to discuss this topic. I don't want to discuss, which one should be canon, because like I said, Feligami is already canon. I specifically want to discuss why Feligami was canon over Lukagami. The topic is Lukagami versus Feligami. The question that we are going to be answering today is, why was Feligami canon over Lukagami? I just feel all too often, I hear people say that Feligami was such a horrible writing choice, the writers are so bad for that, it's terrible writing, they don't fit well together, all of these things. And I genuinely could not disagree more. In my opinion, I think it would have been bad writing if Lukagami was a thing, and that's exactly why I want to talk about this. I hope I can just shed some light on why exactly the writers chose to make Feligami canon instead of Lukagami. So yeah, that is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Anyway, that being said, let's actually move on with our discussion. So when I first came up with the idea of the podcast, I knew that the first episode was going to be about Feligami, okay? Point blank, period, no ifs, ands, or buts, I just knew. And literally right around the exact same time that I was kind of setting everything up for the podcast, I got a comment that was talking about Lukagami rather than Feligami, and I was like, this is literally perfect. This is definitely the topic that we're going for. It just, everything aligned perfectly, and I did really want to talk about this comment. So basically, in order to guide us through this discussion, I did want to just go through this comment bit by bit, just really dissecting everything and kind of just correlating it to our topic, because the thing is, they're kind of talking about why Lukagami is better and why Feligami doesn't make sense or is a terrible ship. And I'm it's exactly what I wanted to talk about. I feel everything they kind of highlight in this comment is exactly what I wanted to talk about. So anyway, that's why I decided to use this comment as a way to guide us through this discussion. But obviously, since we are using a comment, I just feel the need to kind of put this disclaimer out there that I mean no hate to the commenter or literally anyone who likes Lukagami over Feligami. Of course, ships are a personal preference. We don't all have to the same things. We don't have to believe the same things. This video is simply me explaining the plots and dynamics regarding Feligami in hopes of shedding light on why the writers decided to make Feligami canon instead of Lukagami, as most fans were pushing for. So essentially, this video is kind of, like I said, just explaining why Felix is the only logical romantic choice for Kugami. Because mind you, the writers had literally every single character in Miraculous that they could have, paired Kugami with, but they deliberately chose Felix. I think there's a reason for that, and that is what we're going to be talking about today. But first, podcast updates. Yay! I will say though, this podcast is split up into different chapters. So if you guys are not interested in hearing the podcast updates, or if you're not really here for the podcast, you're just here, to talk about the topic, you can skip ahead. So no worries. But for the people that are here for the podcast, let's get into the updates. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for the support. I'm actually recording this after the launch. It's currently the 4th. So we launched 3 days ago, which is crazy to think about. And yeah, I feel this podcast has done really well so far, and I'm honestly kind of surprised. I didn't really have expectations when it came to this podcast and how it was going to go, but I definitely didn't expect what happened to happen. So I'm really, really grateful and really thankful for all of the support. As of recording this, I think we're actually pretty close to 5K, which is insane. We're already halfway to 10K. That's crazy. We only have one video up. It's just insane to me. And yeah, I'm really grateful for everyone who has participated and who has, become a part of this little community. Actually, just thank you for being so active in all of this. Like, I really wanted us all to be like collectively in this. I mean, it's my podcast, but it's like a school, and I think in order to have a school, you have to have some kind of community, and I feel like we've been building that. So yeah, I'm really thankful for all of that, so thank you. Moving on though, second thing that I wanted to talk about, which is probably so obvious, we have a new green screen. I think it's big enough, but if it needs to be bigger, am I gonna change it? No. So y'all will have to deal with it. The next thing is actually really, really important. So I wanted to make a name for you guys. I feel like a lot of podcasts, and maybe not just podcasts, but like channels in general, have a name for their viewers. And I really feel like we should have something. And so I went on Instagram and I asked you guys what we should do for names. And I got a lot of different options. I just took a couple that I personally liked that I thought would kind of fit. So the first one is Miracles. It was actually really surprising just how many people said that. Like, I saw it once and I was like, ooh, that's a really good idea. And then I just like kept seeing it and I was like, how did we all collectively have this like one really good idea? So yeah, I really liked that. The second one was Senti Heads or Bug Heads. Third option is Amux. And then D is actually my own option that I just kind of wanted to throw in here. I had the idea of Centibabies. Let me explain. Okay, in terms of like picking what names I wanted for this podcast, I went very Senti theme because I love the Sentis. Okay, that's literally like my whole thing. Like, when I created this podcast, Senti Club was created right alongside it. And like, one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to create this podcast was so that way people could understand how Sentis work and how the Peacock Miraculous works. Anyway, so Sentis is going to be a really huge topic, and because I love Sentis so much, I kind of wanted to keep the names very like Senti coded. Centibabies is actually just a name that I call Adrian, Kagami, and Felix. Anytime that I see them, I'm like, oh, my Centibabies! So I thought maybe that would be a name that we could do for this. Like, y'all are Centibabies too? I don't know. Anyway, y'all will have to take a vote on that. In the comments, you can tell me which name you like the most. But also, not only should you answer what name you want, I also have another question. So this next like podcast update is class assignments, tests? First thing is yes or no. Now, let me explain first. So when I say class assignments, I'm going to give you assignments not assignments. I'm going to give you an assignment every single time we do one of these episodes. My question for you is just if you want it to be like more formal assignments, because if we don't do something formal, the assignments, quote unquote, would just be like prompts that I give you that you're going to answer in the comments. So either we do something that's less formal and we do assignments as you guys just answering different prompts in the comments, or we could do something that's a little bit more official. A few people have given the options of a Google Classroom, and there's obviously Google Forms, which I've used quite a lot, so we could do some kind of like assignment on Google Forms every single episode, or I could create a Google Classroom. The only thing though is that a Google Classroom, I think there's a limit of how many people can join. I think I looked it up and it was like 250, which is a lot of people, and I don't necessarily believe that 250 people would want to join the Google Classroom, but if in fact they did, and there were maybe more people that wanted to join, they couldn't join, and I just personally don't think that that's very fair. So I don't know if it's the best option, but honestly, if you guys would much rather have a Google Classroom and whatever 250 people first want to join will be like the exclusives or something, we can do that. But yeah, like I said, I just don't know if it's like the most fair thing in the world. I don't necessarily think that there's really a limit of how many people can do a Google form. I know the Google form I posted, there was over like 2,000 responses, so we at least know 2,000 people can respond, but I'm pretty sure like Google forms are kind of meant for like surveys and stuff, so I think a bunch of people can do that. So that kind of just broadens how many people can do this, which I really like. The only problem is there's no like grading system, but like I said, if you don't want any kind of assignment like a Google Classroom or a Google form, we don't have to do those, but you guys would still have some kind of assignment, and that assignment would be just in the comments. Like at the end of every slideshow, I would give you guys a prompt for you guys to answer in the comments, which I actually have a prompt for you guys in this slideshow, only because like we haven't decided if we want to do an official assignment thingy or not. So that's that. You can vote on yes, like official class assignments and tests, or just no. And then if you say yes, you can pick between a Google Classroom and just Google Forms. Fifth update is the uploading schedule. So as I said last podcast episode, there's not really a set schedule for when these podcasts are going to be uploaded. And what I mean by that is like I was trying to shoot for like a weekly upload schedule, but I don't necessarily think I can always post an episode every single week. So we don't have any kind of like set in stone schedule in terms of that. However, I do have somewhat of a set schedule, and it's that any upload that we do will be posted on Sundays at 12 p.m. So like I said, I won't post an episode every single week, but the weeks that we do post, they will be posted on Sundays at 12 p.m. The sixth little update is that the podcast notes, which are essentially just the slideshows that I present in these episodes, will be linked in the description. So if you guys ever want to go back and like look at the slideshow, or if you want to keep the slideshow for, I don't know, like to reference if you ever need to, you can find those. Also, if we do tests in this, class or whatever, you could obviously go back to the slideshows to help you prep for the test. I don't know, maybe some people just want the slideshow and I'm here to give it to you. Anyway, okay. Anyway, that's it. Hold up. Hello? Miraculous University announcements? Right now? On the intercom. Okay. Yeah, y'all can do that. Y'all can do that. Okay. Well, apparently it's school-wide announcement time. Hello, lovely viewers of the Miraculous University podcast. I just wanted to come on here and announce that we are officially on Spotify. If you guys watched the introduction video to this podcast, you would know that we hadn't been put on Spotify yet, but I can confirm that we are in fact on Spotify now, which is really great. So if you were ever busy doing anything and you want something to listen to, I've got your back. You can simply search up Miraculous University on Spotify, or you can go to the first link in the description. Also, if you're listening to this on Spotify, I'm so sorry for this announcement. This is mainly just for my YouTube viewers, so apologies for that. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's get on with the episode. And as always, thank you for listening. Okay, alright. Well, thank you, future Professor Lizzie, for that wonderful announcement. So amazing to know that this podcast is on Spotify. Thank you for that update. Anyway, now that we have all of that out of the way, let's continue on with our topic for today. We're finally getting into the video.
I'm so happy when I'm with you. I have a feeling we're a lot alike. Do you feel the same way? Do you also?
I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. I felt that you and I were the same. We have so much in common, and yet you're also so different. I've never met someone like you.
So first of all, I want to give a little bit of background before we actually get, into talking about the ships. You guys need to be introduced into the ships, or I guess reintroduced into the ships. So let's talk about it. First, let's talk about Lukagami. So Lukagami is the obvious ship between Luka and Kagami. It is a fandom favorite. It was very, very popular and beloved during seasons 4 and 5. I think Lukagami may have been a ship prior to that, and actually, if I'm correct, it was, but I feel like it definitely increased in popularity during those points. And y'all, let me tell you, people were, and probably still are, oh no, actually I know for a fact that they still are, devastated that they didn't get together. And I'm pretty sure that's like where most of the hate stems from in terms of Feligami. Either they just hate Felix and they don't like the fact that Kagami is with him, or they just wanted Lukagami and they're upset about it. Yeah. Anyway, but the idea of the ship actually became popular after Lies and Truth. Like I said, it was most likely created, well, not most likely, it was definitely created prior to that, but it definitely became a lot more popular at that point. And then it became an even bigger thing after Determination, because that's like the first time we saw like a genuine interaction and like friendship between them. Also, I'm pretty sure there's kind of two big reasons why people ship this. The first thing is that, oh, Luka dated Marinette and Kagami dated Adrian, so like they were both the second choices, so like now they need to date. The second thing is like opposites attract, which is definitely a really big like leading force when people try to talk about or discuss Lukagami. It's always like opposites attract, blah 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 blah. We're gonna get into all of that, okay, in this video, I promise. Anyway, moving on to Feligami. So Feligami is the ship between Felix and Kagami, obviously. This first became a ship after the Gabriel Grest interaction. It could have been a thing prior to that, but I genuinely do not remember ever seeing anything about Felix and Kagami until that point, which in my opinion I think was done deliberately, but that's neither here nor there. That's a different story. And like even after Gabriel Agrest, it definitely was not a big ship by any means. It was very niche, and by niche I just mean the people that liked them or the people that shipped them was niche. Like it was known in the fandom that like that was a ship, but not a lot of people actually liked it. And yeah, it was very hated by like the general public and still is to an extent. Obviously it is canon and it became canon in season 5 Pretension. As I said, it was extremely hated at first. Y'all had to be there. When they first became canon, hell broke loose. Like, I feel like you couldn't say anything because you'd just be attacked. It was insane. And as I said before, I'm pretty sure it was very hated because of the Lukagami shippers. They really wanted her with Kagami. Or what? They really wanted her with Luca is what I meant. As I kind of already mentioned before, things have slightly changed over time. Over the years, I've seen a major increase in Feligami fans, which is really, really nice. I'm just loving that the Feligami community is just growing. Another point is that when like people would be doing opinions on, ships, when they got to Feligami, they would always say it's so random and it's so stupid. I hate it. But now I feel like those people who are doing my opinions on ships always say it's so random, but it works, which is definitely better because it means people are a lot more open to Feligami. However, I will just say that both of those ideas are false. Feligami is not random. Feligami is so planned. Because I think if you really, really look at Kagami and Felix's character from the moment they were introduced, you will see that they have kind of been planned from the beginning. It makes so much sense that the writers always knew that Felix and Kagami were going to end up together and they showed signs of it. I just think people saying Feligami is so random, that's wild. But anyway, so now that we've gotten a background on the characters, it's time to kind of talk about how ships in Miraculous are created and why. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because I feel like it will help to give us background and context of why Feligami was made canon instead of Lukagami, right? You need to understand the writer's perspective and the writer's thinking in terms of ships in order to understand why certain ships are canon and why certain ships aren't. Which basically takes us to part 1, understanding Miraculous ships. So essentially, right around the time that The Ruler came out, Thomas did an interview with Seriously where he talked about whether or not Mark and Nathaniel were dating. Essentially, he confirmed that they were not, which was a shock to all of us. We were like, yes, Mark Daniel's canon, they're finally dating, and then come to find out apparently they weren't. That was hurtful, let me tell you. Thomas said that they're essentially in some kind of situationship where I guess they both like each other and maybe they're even aware that they both like each other, but they're just not dating. Which I mean, makes sense for Nathaniel's character and his character development, but that's so off topic. My main point is that during this interview, Thomas went ahead and he kind of discussed how the writers go about relationships in the show and how they kind of come to the conclusion that a ship will be canon. He specifically stated, "We're just trying to see what feels natural for the characters to do or not to do. So at some point when you have characters that come together and characters that don't, that's not by accident. It's just logical." So essentially what they're saying is everything they do in terms of ships is always logic based. So like I said, with Lukagami, a lot of people are like, oh, Kagami should date Luca because Luca dated Marinette and she dated Adrian. That's not logic based, right? Why would you ever date someone simply because they're someone's ex? That's not logical. So essentially what the writers do is they make sure to take everything into consideration. They take the characters, their personality, all of the circumstances, all of, their development and stuff, right? Because the writers know the characters better than anyone. They simply wrote the characters. They know how this person thinks, how this person acts, right? Every tiny little aspect of their personality has been created, has been formulated. So the writers know the characters better, they know their personality, they know how this person thinks about things, and essentially they kind of know who the character would kind of go for, right? They know better than anybody what ships make sense. So taking all this into consideration, we know that for a fact, the reason why Lukagami is not canon is because it doesn't make sense. Feligami makes sense, and that's why it's canon. Also, brownie points for me because Lukagami has always been my biggest op. I've hated them since day one. The day that people started shipping them, I could not stand it. And my reason why was because I thought y'all's logic, that wasn't even logic, was stupid. I'm just gonna say it out right now. Lukagami is so stupid. Oh my gosh, I was trying to be super not biased, I guess, but it's so stupid. It does not make sense. Kagami's personality, okay, we're gonna get into this in this episode. I don't need to get so heated right now, but my point is essentially my biggest reason for not shipping them or not liking them was purely based on logic, right? I know Kagami's character better than anyone, and I'd like to think I know Luca's character pretty well. Knowing them meant that a ship with them together is not logical. And clearly that has been proven and backed up by the fact that Feligami is canon and Lukagami is not. Anyhow, but now that we've, talked about the fact that Lukagami doesn't make sense, Feligami does make sense, we need to talk about why. We know that Feligami is logical and that's why it's canon. But why? And how is it logical? And why is Lukagami not logical? Well, before we get into like diving into absolutely everything, I just wanted to give you guys some things to consider and think about while we're going through the rest of this slideshow. So first thing, we need to consider Kagami's character, her personality, her development, and the biggest thing in my opinion is her wants and desires in and from a relationship. We also need to look at what's her type, right? That's a huge factor. And we kind of already talked about this, but yeah, we do need to look at like what she wants out of a relationship and out of a partner. Of course, we also need to look at Felix's character development, his character, all of his changes, like who he is as a person. And we also kind of need to look at his love, right? So essentially the way that he loves things and loves people and treats the people that he loves, and specifically treats the girl he loves. Same with Luca, we need to look at all of his like personality traits and all blah 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 blah, but we also need to think about like Luca's type, what he wants in a girl and out of a relationship, the kind of person that he would want to date. So now we're finally on to part 2, which is obviously finally going back to the comment that was first introduced. So first of all, I want to read through the whole comment and then we'll just take like each little section and kind of dissect everything. So it says, I like Lukagami because I feel like it would be a good complementary opposites type of relationship. She is blunt and straightforward, he's calm and goes with the flow. Their characteristics, except for a few, would complement each other perfectly while still allowing for each other to grow. Luca to stand up more for himself and what he wants, and Kagami to relax a little and enjoy the moment. Honestly, it is because of this that I like their ship, and it's important to remember that Kagami was isolated growing up, so she still has a lot to learn about social situations. Also, I hate the idea of her and Felix. They don't fit well together. Okay. And they would both end up being toxic for each other because he seemingly only loves her because she's a senti like him. And she only likes him because she feels bad for him / gets her anime romance with him. Plus, he was also isolated a lot growing up and hates the whole world, so not the right person for Kagami, but that's just my thoughts on it. So this is part 2.1, opposites attract. So we're moving on to the first little section of this comment that once again says, I like Lukagami because I feel like it would be a good complementary opposites type relationship. She's blunt and straightforward, he's calm and goes with the flow. Their characteristics, except for a few, would complement each other perfectly while still allowing for each other to grow. So first of all, I do agree that they do complement each other in a lot of ways. They do really have a good foundation for an opposites attract type of relationship. Like, I feel like when you do see opposites attract relationship, like it's usually some kind of structure like Kagami and Luca. Not exactly, I think their personalities are slightly different, and that probably kind of also helps to make all the difference in terms of their relationship. But yeah, I would agree to an extent that they do really have almost like the picture perfect opposites attract kind of relationship. However, opposites attract only works if that's what the person or the people are looking for, or if that's what they want, right? Because people are different. Everybody is different. Everyone has different, personal preferences, and they like different people and they can get along with different people. Like, just because you guys like opposites attract, that doesn't mean that every single person in the world or every single character in the world wants that kind of relationship. And like in some ships in Miraculous, I've seen a lot of people hating on them because they're like, no, they're the same person or they're so similar, and like that's the whole reason that they're hating on them, which I think is stupid, because you know what? Some people need to date someone who is just like them in order for it to work, right? Not every relationship needs to be opposites attract. They don't always need to like complement each other. Obviously, this isn't me saying that opposite attract relationships are stupid and that like they can't be a thing or they're not a thing. I'm just mainly highlighting the fact that not everybody wants that. Not everybody is like that. It's just not realistic to say that every single ship should be a thing because they are opposites attract. I just don't think there's a lot of weight on that. It depends more on the personality of the characters rather than just like who they are, right? It depends on what they want and who they want, not just how they act. And that is basically my whole point in terms of Feligami, and specifically Kagami, only because we know a lot more about her than Felix. Kagami does not want to date someone opposite to her. Let me say that again. Kagami does not want to date somebody who is opposite to her. Now you're probably like, Lizzie, how do you know that? Well, first of all, rude of you to ask that because I know I know Kagami better than anybody, okay? No, I'm kidding. But there is actual proof, and the proof is Adrigami. So Kagami only liked Adrian because she thought that they were so similar, and the episode Lies definitely establishes that. Like, I feel like prior to Lies, we knew Kagami liked Adrian, but we didn't know exactly why. Right? We weren't given like a bullet point plot list of like, this is why she likes him, this is why, like, blah, 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 blah. And it's not like Lies did that either, but I definitely do think that it gave us an idea of who she wants, how she wants her relationship to go, and essentially just the fact that who she was in love with was not Adrian. Like, the idea that she had of Adrian was completely false. But we'll get to that in a minute. But for now, I want to talk about her confession to Adrian, because I think that is very telling. So in her confession, she specifically states, I have a feeling we're a lot alike.
I'm so happy when I'm with you. I have a feeling we're a lot alike. Do you feel the same way? Do you also?
It's not like she's just declaring her love to him, right? It's a confession. There's a very big difference. A declaration would just be, hey, I love you, and you don't necessarily need an explanation of why. You already know each other, you're already dating, you've already told each other what you like about each other. This is a confession where she's laying down all of her feelings. And usually in a confession, you'll be like, oh, I love this about you, or I like this about you. You're kind of this person, and that's how we work together. Like, that's what fits me, and like all of these things, right? So the fact that she says, I have a feeling we're a lot alike, kind of establishes that that is why she liked Adrian. Because right after that, she would be like, do you feel like we're alike? Do you love me too? That's what she was going to say. Let's listen to this again.
I'm so happy when I'm with you. I have a feeling we're a lot alike. Do you feel the same way? Do you also?
Yeah, she said, do you feel the same way? Do you also? Essentially what she was saying is, do you feel that way? Do you feel that we're similar? And because of that, do you love me too? Like, that's what she was getting at. So, like I said, right then and there, it just establishes the idea that she fell for him, or she liked him. Like, the basis of her love for him was simply because they were, quote unquote, so alike. And like I said, that is not true. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. But for now, I just want to really like wire it into your brains that in this moment, she is implying that she's not interested in someone who doesn't have a similar personality to hers. Because like I said, the basis of her love for him was the fact that they were so similar. That's why she liked him, which kind of brings me to my other point. Another really good example of this is in the art room scene from Lies.
Try something that's more natural. More you.
What about meow?
No, you're not at all natural.
Yes, I am. I promise. This is me.
No, that's you when you're being silly.
So basically what happens is Kagami said she wanted to draw a picture of Adrian because she wanted to capture his true soul, who he really is. So she's like, go over there and do a pose. I'll draw you. He keeps doing modeling poses and she's like, that's not really you, which, yes, girl, go off. That is so true. He's not being himself when he's doing all these modeling poses. So then she's like, just be yourself. And he instantly goes to the cat pose because obviously cat noir is a really big part of his personality and who he is. Him being silly and goofy and dorky and just, you know, all the things, right? That's who he truly is. Or at least that's a really big part of him. So he was not lying. He wasn't just being silly or weird or whatever when he was acting like that, right? He really was being himself. But for some reason, Kagami could not fathom the fact that he was being truly him. I think that right there establishes that who she thinks Adrian is not truly who he is. She has this warped idea of who Adrian truly is. But I think it also kind of establishes the idea that Kagami once again liked him because she thought they were so similar, right? She couldn't fathom the idea that he was being so silly and goofy and dorky like that because she herself is not like that. She would never do or say that, right? We know Kagami. She's not one to joke around like that. She would never. If someone was like, be yourself, she would not go, meow, right? And so, in my opinion, just the fact that she couldn't fathom that with Adrian being his true self clearly just shows us that she really did think that he was just like her. Because like I said, she would never do or say anything like that. And it's like, in this moment, Kagami did not like him, right? She's liked him this whole time, but then when he starts acting like his true self, all of a sudden she's like, I don't like you, I don't like you, I don't like you. And it wasn't until she kind of forced, I don't like to say the word forced, but I guess kind of forced him to act a little bit like her. And by the way, the reason why I don't like to say forced is because it's not like Kagami knew that Adrian wasn't really like that and she was shaping him to act like that. When she was doing this, she thought that she was genuinely making him be who he truly was. In her head, this is exactly who Adrian is. So by making him do that, she was just making him be his true self, or at least she thought she was, because like I said, that's who she thought he was. But anyway, so like I've been saying, essentially the fact that it's only when he started acting like her she liked him just establishes the fact that that is the kind of person that she likes. That is who she wants to be with. If the person does not act like her, if he doesn't have the same personality as her, she's not really interested. I mean, there is a lot more than just that, but specifically for the context of this video, we're only going to be diving into that aspect. So essentially, with all of that in mind, I think it's safe to say that Luca is not the kind of person that she'd fall for. Yes, they complement each other, but complimenting doesn't always equal a relationship. And I think that that is very important because, like, friendships, I feel like the reason why friendships work so well is because you tend to complement each other, right? But that doesn't automatically mean that you're dating. Yeah, like I said, Kagami and Luca do really complement each other, but I feel like it's only platonically. And the reason why it's platonically is because Kagami does not want to date someone like Luca. She would never be attracted to someone like Luca. And that's basically the whole entire reason why I would say that Lukagami is not logical. That's why I couldn't understand why people would ever ship them, because it's so blatantly obvious that that's not who Kagami wants. She could never fall in love with someone like Luca, and I think it would be so stupid if they made that a thing. Because in what world? In what world would she ever be attracted to someone like Luca? I'm so glad the writers did not make that mistake. So we've talked a lot about who Kagami would fall for, but now I want to highlight a relationship in general, because obviously there's two sides to a relationship. There's the actual relationship, like what you're doing, how it works, how it functions, but then there's also like the two people, the individual people, like the attraction and then the actual relationship. So not only does Lies establish the kind of person Kagami wants or would fall for, but it also establishes what kind of relationship she wants, how she wants to be treated, the kind of things she wants to do in a relationship, all of those things. Basically, Lies was just one big long list of how Kagami wants her relationship to be. And how we know this is because of the way that she was treating Adrian. She knew what she wanted in a person, she knew what she wanted in a relationship, and Adrian wasn't giving her anything. So she was pushing for those things herself, right? So when she was lying to get away from everyone just so they could spend time together, what she really wanted was for Adrian to do those things. But Adrian wasn't doing those things. So she was like, all right, I'll step up, I'll fix this relationship. And I feel like maybe she thought that her stepping up in the relationship would end up making him step up more, which obviously that did not happen. And I feel like that's one of the biggest reasons why their relationship kind of crumbled to the ground. So I kind of want to talk about a quote from the episode Protection. So Kagami says, "If you're waiting for Adrian to do something, then you can be certain nothing will happen."
If you're waiting for Adrian to do something, then you can be certain nothing will happen.
So essentially that line came from Kagami just projecting her relationship with Adrian on to Marinette. It just came from a point of like, she's, you know, dated Adrian, so she has experience with Adrian, and obviously Adrigami and Adrianette are like two completely different relationships. Adrian wasn't invested in Adrigami and he was invested in Adrianette, so we clearly know there's a big difference there, and saying that isn't necessarily true. I mean, it is to an extent, but for the most part we know in terms of Adrianette, Adrian is always pushing for those things, right? He's always kind of the first one to do things and get things done, right? He was pushing for a relationship with Marinette, hardcore. Not in this episode, but just in season 5. And, you know, we know Adrian is Cat Noir. This man is so pushy in terms of relationships. So the fact that he wasn't so pushy with Kagami just instantly tells us that he wasn't in love with her and he wasn't invested in the relationship at all. So her saying that is not true. It's not true about Adrian's personality, or who he is, or the kinds of things that he's going to do. But you know what it is true for? Adrigami and their relationship. So simply, Kagami saying that wasn't just like speaking facts about his personality. It was simply just her projecting from her relationship. I feel like she was still a little salty about it, and we can see that here. So anyway, I got a little off topic, but once again, my point is just that this definitely shows us that she wants someone who will take initiative in the relationship. As I said before, she wanted Adrian to do all of these things, but he wasn't doing them, so she took initiative. Which I feel like makes some people believe that she wants to, you know, be the one to take initiative in the relationship, and she's the one that wants to, like, push for all of these things, but that's just not true. She doesn't want that. Like I said, she wants her partner to do that. She just kind of wants to go with the flow. The only reason that she was doing those things and pushing for those things in lies was because Adrian wasn't doing it. So she's like, okay, guess I'll do it. So yeah, I just think that's what that line kind of establishes. It definitely does show us that she wants someone who would do anything and everything to be with her, right? She doesn't want someone who would just sit on the sidelines and do nothing and just wait for everything else to happen. She wants someone who will do the things for her. Obviously, that doesn't mean that she doesn't want to put in any of the work. That's not true. It's just she wants someone who, I guess, would take just as much initiative as she does or would, and like maybe even like slightly more. I don't know. Oh, also another point is I feel like it shows us that Kagami wants someone who will stand on what they want. No questions, no hesitation, no ifs, ands, or buts. If they want it, they're gonna get it. Or actually, I should say, if they want it, they should go chase for it instead of waiting for someone else to bring it to them. Like, that is what she truly wants in a relationship. Adrian wasn't doing that, and that's why she, ended the relationship. There were other reasons, but that's a really big part. Lies also shows us that Kagami wants a relationship in which they sneak off and lie to people just to spend time together. Like, literally the whole entire episode was Kagami making up lies so that way they could sneak off and spend time together, like in the art room, on the boat. She just wanted to have some alone time with him. And she was willing to do anything and everything for that. And like I said, she also wants someone who would do that as well. She wants someone who would lie and, whatever. So that way they could just sneak off and spend time together. Like, I feel like that's just her dream relationship. And she was so mad that Adrian wasn't doing that. I feel like at the end of the day, she wants someone who she can be like a little reckless and mischievous with. Anyway, knowing what we know about Luka and how he acts in a relationship, I think it's safe to say that he's quite frankly the opposite of that. Luka is very go with the flow. He lets the other person kind of rule the relationship and take initiative. He's a very like only if you want to kind of person, right? Like, he may initiate something, but then he'll probably backtrack and be like, oh, but only if it's what you want. Like, I'm cool with whatever. Like, let me tell you, somebody like that would piss Kagami off. I never hesitate. She doesn't want someone who's gonna be like that, right? If they want something, if they want to go do something, it's, we're doing this. I mean, I guess they wouldn't be like, let's do this. They would kind of propose the idea, and if she says yes, they would do it. They wouldn't be like, we're doing this thing now. Like, that's too controlling. Kagami doesn't want controlling, right? She just wants someone who like would take initiative in like proposing these ideas and sticking with it. And if I'm being completely honest, I think Luka is way too calm for her. Like, she does not want someone who's like that. Oh my gosh, I keep saying that, but it's so true. Also, I do think it's important that Kagami does not have the qualities or the personality that Luka would want in a relationship. Like, when I think of who Luka wants, in my opinion, Kagami's not even in like the realm of it, right? Just the way she acts and the way she talks and the way she goes about things, I just don't think it's something that Luka would want to date. I feel like Luka wants someone who's opposite to him, but who has more of Marinette's personality. Because, mind you, Marinette is also very, like, opposite in terms of Luka. That's very obvious. Lukanette was a very opposites attract kind of relationship. So we know for a fact that Luka wants someone opposite to him. But as you guys know, Kagami is even more opposite than Marinette. And in so many different ways that I feel like it's just too conflicting, So yeah, now that we've kind of discussed why Lukagami is like very conflicting, let's kind of move more towards Feligami. So basically, if we take everything into consideration, everything that we've talked about, up until this point, talking about who Kagami fell in love with, what she wants in a relationship, and how she wants to be treated, you just begin to see just how perfect Felix is for her, right? I've talked about, all of these things time and time again, what Kagami wants in a relationship, who she wants to date. And if you think of, Felix while you're talking about all of those points, you're like, oh, check mark, check mark, check. Like, it just makes sense. He is the definition of what she wanted, right? The personality when she fell in love with Adrian wasn't Adrian. She had this false idea of who Adrian was. But that personality did exist, but not in Adrian, in Felix. Oh my god, I say this all the time, but when Kagami fell in love with Adrian, truly, she actually just fell in love with Felix. Like, point blank, period. Because Felix is the exact person that she thought Adrian was. Clearly, at the end of the day, Felix is her dream guy. He treats and loves her exactly how she wanted. And the thing is he didn't even know how she wanted to be treated. He didn't even know how she wanted to be loved. He didn't really even know her, right? Especially he didn't know her during the Adragami time. I feel like if he was around in the Adragami time, he'd probably know a lot more about who she wanted to date and how she wanted the relationship to go, but he wasn't. He knew nothing, and he just waltzes in and hands her everything she's ever wanted on a silver platter. To me, that is perfection. That is the perfect relationship. Also, another really big important thing to note is that Kagami didn't have to push for anything. Like with Adrian, it was this constant battle and constant like pushing of her to get him to do stuff that she wanted. Adrian still didn't reciprocate that, but Felix, he just comes in, like I said, he just gives her everything she wanted on a silver platter, and she didn't even have to ask for it. She didn't have to beg for it. Like, he literally just did everything and anything she ever wanted, not knowing that's what she wanted. Oh my god, how can you sit there and say that they're not perfect for each other, that they don't fit? I will say, Kagami and Felix are some of the most misunderstood characters, so that's probably why people get it wrong, but I digress. Anyway, kind of going back to the whole she doesn't have to push for things, like in terms of what she wanted in a relationship, we know from lies that she wants to like sneak off, right? She wants to lie and just get away from everyone to spend time together. And in Emotion, Felix literally suggests that. He suggests dipping the party and getting away from everyone just so they could spend time together. Well, I mean, the reason he said that was so they could be free. It wasn't necessarily to spend time with each other, but you know, if they're sneaking off together, they're most likely going to spend time together. They're not just going to leave. So even though it wasn't like stated specifically that they would spend time together, that's like kind of what he was like leaning more towards. And that's exactly what she wanted from Adrian. She wanted Adrian to propose those things and to do those things. And then also, in Pretension, he literally does just that. I mean, yes, he technically quote unquote like kidnapped her, but like at the end of the day, what they were doing in that episode was sneaking off and sneaking around. Kagami didn't really like the fact that she was taken by Felix and they were spending time at the beginning, but you know, through the rest of it, she was kind of willingly following him and willingly getting to know him. I don't know, I just think she really liked that about him. So if you're listening to this, there's a specific screenshot I have right here of Kagami, and she's like looking at Felix, but she has like this very specific look on her face. It's like right after Felix had explained something. I don't remember exactly what he explained, but he had said something, and there's just this shot of Kagami's face, and it's very soft, and she looks very shocked. Like, she's definitely starting to realize something, which like that's the reason why I like it. I just feel like this screenshot really just captures the fact that she's starting to realize basically everything that I stated on this slide, right? The fact that Felix is doing everything she wanted and he's acting the way that she always thought Adrian was acting, or she always wanted her partner to act. Because also she had like a semi-warped idea of Felix. I mean, she knew him as Argos, as Felix, like the bad guy. That's who she knew him as. But in this moment, he's showing her her real personality. So in this moment, she's kind of realizing that, oh, Felix is not the person that I thought he was. Like, he's much different, and surprise, surprise, apparently not only is he different from who I thought he was, but he's literally the exact person that I wanted. That's what this face is giving. So anyway, that's why I love that. Just wanted to throw that in there. Moving on to part 2, point 2, growth and development. We're finally on to this second little, why'd I say it like that? Second little section of this. Once again, it says Luca to stand up more for himself and what he wants, and Kagami to relax a bit and enjoy the moment. Honestly, it is because of that I like their relationship, and it's important to remember that Kagami was isolated growing up, so she still has a lot to learn about social situations. Why can I never say that? That's what it ends up turning out to. So yeah, once again, I definitely do agree with this. They are a good duo, but once again, working well doesn't always equal a relationship. Me and my friends, obviously we get along well. We work well together. That's why we're friends. Doesn't mean I like them romantically, okay? You can work well with someone and it doesn't mean you like them romantically. That's just, it's how the world spins. Okay, and as I've kind of previously stated, those things are not what Kagami and Luca want in a relationship. I do really love the idea of their friendship though. Like a Kagami and Luca duo is so iconic. So kind of just focusing on the very end of this little section, it's important to remember that Kagami was isolated growing up, so she still has a lot to learn about social situations. This is my argument on this. So first of all, season 5 explores the isolation and socially awkward arc in terms of Kagami, right? She feels very alone, she feels very misunderstood, and she doesn't really know how to integrate herself into the friend group. And she doesn't really know how to, you know, get the ball rolling in terms of her friendship with Marinette, right? She obviously wants to be really good friends, best friends with Marinette, but she doesn't really know how to make that, you know, really a thing. That's something that she really struggles with in the episode Perfection. I always get perfection and protection mixed up. Anyway, but I'm pretty sure it's perfection. But obviously, at the end of the episode, we see that she's been accepted into the friend group, and we just see her being integrated into, their friendship. We're already seeing that growth, right? And I almost feel like perfection in a lot of ways was almost kind of like the end of that arc, right? I don't think that her like isolation or socially awkward side is really going to be discussed a whole lot, because once again, that's kind of been her main, character, whatever, I don't know how you describe it, but that's kind of what her main character was about, right? Always constantly talking about her being isolated and being socially awkward through seasons 2 and 5. So I just feel like we've already explored that. We're already kind of done. She doesn't have to really focus on those kinds of things anymore. She's not isolated. Like I said, she's in the friend group. And we've already seen that growth and development in season 6. She's already changed so much. And that's something that is definitely highlighted in season 6. But what's not highlighted? The things that used to be highlighted. Her not being a part of the group. Her being very isolated. Her not really knowing how to act in social situations. See, I can't say it. My point is that that's something that she's already had growth and development on. So to say that she needs to be with Luca in order for those things to develop just isn't true. She doesn't need Luca. She has her friends. Like, that's already an arc that's already said and done. She didn't need Luca for that. Like, obviously, it still takes a while to fully develop from that, so we may see, like, a little bit of it this season, but like I said, this is an arc that has been ongoing since season 2, so it feels that we've kind of closed off that chapter and we're ready to move on. So, in my opinion, season 6 will most likely focus on Kagami extending that growth onto Felix, which we will get into a little bit, but basically, in terms of her, like, social whatever, it's mainly just going to be focusing on the fact that Kagami has already had her arc done with, right? She's already accepted socially. She's already in the group. She's already had that figured out. So I feel like she's just going to kind of extend that development that she's already had onto Felix. And the reason why is just because Felix trusts and loves Kagami in a way that no one else does. She's the only one that he can truly open himself up to. So essentially, she's just able to help him in a way that no one else can. And because she was kind of in the same situation, right? He's very socially awkward and blah, 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 blah. Like Kagami mentions that in Pretension. I don't remember exactly what she said, but something along the lines of like, he's just like me. So clearly that just shows us that like, she's truly the only one that can understand him, and she's the only one that can defend him and help him. And I think that's why Kagami's character will be used to further Felix's like social development, because she's literally the only one that can, because she knows how to. That's slightly off topic. Moving on. Oh, another really big point that I want to bring out is not only the fact that Kagami's kind of already done with that arc, so it doesn't make sense for Luca to be needed, but I also just want to point out the fact that you don't always need someone opposite to you in order to help you grow. Especially with Kagami and Felix and their situations, it's better for them to be with someone who's just like them. Their stories are very, very particular and very specific, and they are very similar in a lot of ways, and it's just something that a lot of characters don't physically understand. And so in order for someone to have that growth and that development, they kind of need to be with someone who understands them, right? I feel like sometimes you can't help someone if you don't understand their situation. Like, you can give advice to somebody, but if you've never been through what they've been through, that advice doesn't always work, and you don't know how to specifically curate that information or whatever to them, if that makes sense. So I just think that that's why it's so important for Felix and Kagami to be with someone who they're just like, because no one else would be able to understand them. Luca may be quote-unquote the therapist friend, but would he be able to help Kagami in the way that she needs? No, because he doesn't understand her. He hasn't been through what she's been through. Same with Felix. He can't be with someone who's opposite to him because he needs somebody who knows what he's been through. Because also the thing is like, Kagami has been through that and she's gotten through it. Felix hasn't. He needs somebody who's been through that and who has gotten through it. Obviously their situations are very different, but I feel like specifically like the social and the isolation aspect is very, very similar. And like I've said, Kagami's already gotten through that. So it's better for someone who's gotten through that to help Felix out rather than someone different. And yes, I do think that people who are opposite can help each other because they see different sides. But like I said, every situation is different. Every person is different. Not everyone needs the same things. And with Kagami and Felix, it just so happens that they both need someone who's just like them. They're the only ones who truly understand each other. And because of that understanding, they're the only ones who can truly help each other out and help, with development and things. We're on slide 39 of 74. Y'all, we gotta lock in. We gotta lock in. So continuing on with our growth and development, there are two aspects of a person: the way they've grown and the ways in which they have not. So in terms of growth, Felix has grown in terms of freedom. He understands how to get it and why it's important. He grew up, being controlled, and he's finally at a point where he has that freedom. And quite frankly, I think Felix took free will to the extreme. Okay, but he's finally dialed it back, right? He's finally like, okay, I'm free. I don't need to be this harsh about it. That's a whole other story, but he's definitely changed. Instead of abusing free will, he's finally like, I have free will, but I need to tone it back, right? Anyway, he understands why it is so important to have, and he's willing to help people get it. He strongly believes in having control over your own life. That's kind of his whole arc. He was really interested in saving Adrian, like that's kind of been his whole thing. So yeah, freedom and just living your life and being in control of your life, that is where Felix has grown a lot. Kagami, as I've kind of already explained, has grown socially. She's being integrated into the group, meaning she finally has friends and people she can lean on and understand. She has more of an open sense of dependency that she's been looking for. Like, I feel like Kagami is very dependent, but I feel like in a lot of ways she was always independent because she had to be. I feel like some people always say, oh, I'm so independent, but they're not actually really independent. They're just so used to being independent that it's really all they've known. They really would prefer to have people to lean on. And I think Kagami's a lot like that too. I still think she is very independent in a lot of ways, but I feel like for the most part, she has always been very dependent, but she's just had to carry the weight of being independent for so long that that's really all she knows. So yeah, now that she's been integrated into the group, she finally has people who she can like be dependent on, which is really nice. She also knows how to act and react in certain situations better. Now moving on to the ways to grow. So Kagami, she struggles with freedom and her emotions. She was always told to repress them growing up. Not even just growing up, like up until the point of pretension. So she always like really struggled emotionally. And Mr. Felix, being the king of freedom and also being our little emotional king, he can help her, right? He's definitely grown a lot in those ways, emotionally and freedom wise. Like, those are big aspects of his character. And so because that's something that Kagami struggles with, they just connect so well. Like, everything she struggles with, Felix doesn't, so he can help her. And then all of the ways that Kagami has grown, Felix still struggles with that, so she can help him out with that as well. He's able to let her know that emotions are okay, that, she's not a slave to them for feeling whatever she needs to. Like, it's okay, right? We have emotions for a reason and we're meant to express them. And Felix has been really good at, helping Kagami be able to see that. But we have already seen that she's much more emotionally intelligent this season, and it's, of course, due to Felix. Like, literally in Pretension, we see that after she spent time with Felix, she's instantly able to just kind of like talk to her mom and be like, I'm not a slave to my emotions. Like, I'm okay to feel whatever I feel. She only spent a little bit of time with him, and the fact that she's already grown so much tells us that all of that growth, for the most part, is due to Felix. He's really helped her out. And that's something that I personally really love to highlight in terms of Feligami, because like so many people completely overlook it, right? They say that Kagami's a free therapist for Felix. Like, he just takes in this relationship. Like, he's just basically like sucking the life out of Kagami because Kagami's such a good person and he needs every bit of her goodness to like develop as a person, and that's not even remotely the case. Don't get me started. Guys, they both help each other out, right? They both give and take just as much as each other in this relationship. Kagami gives, Felix takes, but also Kagami takes. I feel like they have such a good balance. They're both able to help each other in a lot of ways for different things. It's not just Felix who is leaning on Kagami to grow. Kagami is also leaning on Felix in order to grow. And also, not even just that, they're also leaning on themselves and their friends to grow. They're all growing in so many different ways, and so many different people and so many different characters are the reason for that, right? We're gonna see Felix developing through other people, not just Kagami. Kagami's just what allows him to be integrated into the friend group. We're probably gonna see him making friends and getting along with people, and those people are going to help further his growth, because just getting all of his growth from Kagami is not always going to help. You always need more people. So anyway, my main point is that he's not just taking from Kagami. He also has stuff to give, and Kagami takes too. They both give and take. Point blank, period. Moving on to Felix though. Felix, of course, still struggles a lot with social situations. He was isolated as a child as well as Kagami, so he's not very good with like interacting with people and talking and just like how to interpret different social situations, and of course that's due to the way that he grew up. And in my opinion, like, I think Colt was kind of the one who always kept everybody away from Felix, so that is why he was isolated, and I think that isolation just continued, right? He's like, I don't need anybody. Not to mention, with the way that his father treated him, he just instantly assumed that every single person was bad. Everyone was out to get him. Everyone was out to harm him. So when he finally got out of that, because he was isolated, he wanted to stay isolated. But also, because he was hurt as a kid, he just believes that everyone else would be out to hurt him as well. And so it's just like push people away, push people away, push people away. He didn't trust people. He didn't trust anybody. So of course, if you don't trust people, you're not going to let them into your life. You're going to push them away. And that's exactly how Kagami is going to help him grow. I mean, I think there's a bunch of ways that Kagami is helping Felix grow, but I think the biggest thing is simply like she's helping him not to push people away. She's helping him grow and to trust people. And there's basically like two good examples of like her helping him grow.
Now is the time to trust Felix. We'll cover you.
Trust them.
Okay, that's example one.
Do you think she can be trusted?
She's my friend. We don't have a choice.
Trust. Trust. That is the biggest thing. Basically, Felix's whole character arc has been about a lack of trust. That is what we have seen time and time again. So many people are like, well, why didn't Felix just tell Ladybug that Gabriel's monarch? Because he did not trust her. He did not trust anybody. Yes, it's true that Marinette or Ladybug never gave him a reason not to trust him, right? They were actively trying to defeat Gabriel. However, he just did not and could not trust anybody around him, no matter how good they were. He didn't want to talk to people, he didn't want to let people in, and he pushed people away. Because like I said, there was a lack of trust. So in order for Felix to truly become a good person and truly have, you know, his character development and to be accepted into the group, he needs to trust people. Of course, other people, you know, need to accept him, but for the most part, he needs to allow himself to be open and to trust those people. And as you guys saw in these examples, she's always right by his side being, you can trust people, you can trust people. Felix knows that he can trust people. He has the capabilities of trusting people, but he needs that person behind him being like, it's okay, you can trust people. Like, she's just aiding him in that trust, I guess. And I think that's why she's so incredibly good for people. Like Kagami, I don't think she's ever really struggled with trust all that much, but Felix has. And, you know, Kagami knows who she can trust for the most part, right? She knows the people that she can trust and the people that she can't. And so she's just very useful for Felix in that way. And I think maybe we'll see a lot more of that in this season where she's like, it's okay, you can trust them. And I feel like also anytime they meet someone new, Felix is probably gonna be like, can I trust them? Can I trust them? Like, not only is Kagami there by his side to let him know that people can be trusted, but I think he's also right by her side to just reaffirm who can be trusted and who can't. Like, he's actively trying to gain more trust, and he gains more trust by, I guess, not by, but like through Kagami and her being like, it's okay, you can trust them. So yeah, I think that's just why she's so incredibly good for him. And like I said, it's not just Felix, you know, using Kagami to gain trust or whatever, right? Like, Kagami also needs things from Felix as well. But anyway, going back to my original statement that you don't need somebody opposite to you in order to grow, I do think that everything we've talked about so far does kind of prove the fact that, you know, you can be with someone who's just like you and you can change, right? We talked about Kagami's development. We talked about Felix's development. All of that goes to show that the reason why they've developed in a lot of ways is because of each other. They've helped each other grow, and they will. They will help each other grow. Kagami didn't need someone who was complete opposite to her in order for that to happen. Felix didn't need someone who was the complete opposite to him in order for that to happen. Some people may need someone who's the complete opposite to them in order to grow, but that's not everyone. Everyone is different. People are different. And that's how it is, you know, for Felix and Kagami. They're not those kind of people. They need someone who is exactly like them and who has been exactly in their situation in order for this to work or for them to grow and develop. And like I said, they're not just leaning on each other to grow. There's all these other people, you know, all these platonic relationships that do help them grow as well, which is very, very important. Which actually brings me to part 2.3, Sentis in love. We're also on to the third section of the comment, obviously. It says, also, I hate the idea of her and Felix, they don't fit well together, and they both would end up being toxic for each other because he seemingly only loves her because she's a senti like him. I see stuff like this all of the time. I mean, it's like a joke in the fandom, and I joke about it all of the time, like Felix only likes Lukagami because he found out she was a senti, or Felix only liked Lukagami after he found out she was a feather. Like, it's just an ongoing joke, right? And I joke about it all of the time. I make so many videos like that because obviously I talk about Feligami a lot, and that's just a joke that I make. But at the end of the day, it really is just a joke. And it's funny, probably overused, don't care, still gonna use it. But yeah, it's just, that's not the case. Just a joke, not true. I feel like there's just so much evidence that backs up the fact that that's not true. So let's get into it. Explanation time. We're gonna be talking about just like the timeline of events, how we got from A to B. Just to like explain why some people might believe that he only likes her because she's a senti. I just want to talk about the timeline before we actually get into any of like the nitty gritty details, so that way you know the basic storyline before we get into like all of the major points. Not that you guys care. Okay, anyway, so Gabriel Agreste was the first episode of them having some kind of interaction. It was the first time they quote unquote met. They didn't really meet. They just looked at each other, but still, it was the first time they saw each other, and just right off the bat, they seemingly did not like each other. They hated each other, like, they just glare. I mean, Kagami just simply looked at Felix, and Felix glared because he was already glaring. She glares at him back. Probably my favorite Feligami scene ever. And then Emotion was the first time they like officially met after that. So they had no other interaction up until the point of Emotion. And this first interaction is the exact moment that he finds out she's a senti. Also, yes, Kagami is a senti. Okay, the amok is in her ring. This scene right here, where he grabs her hand and then he like goes down to kiss it, and then he has like this weird expression on his face. Yeah, that's him sensing the amok within her ring. We're not going to dive too deeply into, you know, Kagami being a senti because it's not important, but just so you know, she is one, point blank, period. And then obviously, right after that moment, they go to the dance, and Felix spends the whole dance flirting up a storm. Like every single time he talks to her, it's just some flirty thing. Interesting.
Are you jealous? It's admirable of you, my queen.
Are you jealous? My queen? Like, come on. He's so hardcore flirting. Anyway, moving along with the timeline, the next episode is Pretension, where he takes her away to save her, quote unquote, and get to know her. Obviously, this kind of establishes the fact that Felix has a crush on Kagami, right? Like, prior to that, we just thought the flirting was kind of just random. But then in Pretension, we're like, oh, it's because he liked her. So the flirting basically wasn't for nothing, right? There's a reason behind it. So essentially, Pretension shows us that he did like her in Emotion. Basically, the timeline of his feelings is that he hated her in Gabriel Agreste, but then all of a sudden he likes her in Emotion. That's why he's flirting with her. And literally the only thing that changed between these two episodes is that he had found out that she was a senti. So that clearly indicates that the only reason why he liked her was because she was a senti, right? It makes sense. Actually, no, it doesn't. Wrong. Slightly. Yes, Kagami being a senti played a role in his feelings for her, but not in the way that you might believe. Okay, so this is my theory. So in Pretension, he says this.
But ever since I saw you, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. I felt that you and I were the same.
So this is my theory. Felix said, ever since I saw you, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, instead of ever since I met you, meaning he most likely started liking her all the way back to Gabriel Agreste. Because like I said, one thing that we established in the like timeline is that the first interaction was just them seeing each other. They hadn't met at that point. They only ever met in Emotion. So if he had said, ever since I met you, he would have been referencing Emotion. But since he said, ever since I saw you, he's most likely referencing Gabriel Agreste. Now, I know some of you may be like, well, no, he didn't like her because did you see the way he was looking at her? Well, my main like argument for this is that he didn't look at her like that specifically. That was just the expression that was on his face. He was just looking at everybody like that. It's not just Kagami that he was glaring at. Actually, he just looked pissed off, and he was pissed off at everybody. It wasn't directly Kagami, but the fact that he had kind of looked at Kagami while having that expression, like that's why she was like glaring at him, because she's like, girl, why are you looking at me like that? Yeah, so to kind of like talk about that and dissect that, I wanted to bring back the point we made in 2.2. Trust is the biggest problem. He didn't trust anyone who wasn't like him, aka a senti. And Kagami, even if he liked her, that there was no exception for that. He didn't like anybody. If he had a crush on you, didn't like you, didn't trust you. Not a single person he trusted. Besides Adrian. He obviously trusted Adrian. He never really opened up to Adrian, but he was a lot more comfortable around Adrian than he had been around, anybody else. And that's simply because, he was a Senti. In his head, Senti good, anyone else bad. That's how he kind of sees the world, obviously due to his father's treatment. So because he does not trust anybody, Kagami would be included in that because, mind you, he didn't know she was a Senti at this point. He thought that she was just everybody else, and everyone else is a monster. So aka, Kagami is also a monster. He was just as skeptical of her as he was as anyone else. That's why he was glaring. And the glare didn't go away when he looked at Kagami. Because of course he was still skeptical of her, as he was with everyone else. But that all changed, of course, when he found out she was a Senti, because he realized he could trust her. Like I said, he didn't trust anyone who wasn't a Senti. So when Kagami, was discovered to be a Senti, he knew that he could trust her. He instantly trusted her. So Senti equals trust. Trust equaled falling in love in this particular situation. So with all of that in mind, this is my logic-based, theorized timeline. So based off of everything we know about Felix, Kagami, their relationship, blah, 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 this is the kind of timeline that I've theoretically come up with. Well, I've come up with theoretically, there we go. So in Gabriel Agreste, Felix thought, oh, she's cute. But she's probably evil like everyone else. Don't want to get too close to that. Gotta stay away. I'm telling you, that is exactly what went through his head as he's looking at her. So anyway, from that point on, he formed a slight crush on her, but because of that lack of trust, I don't think it's a crush that he accepted. He was like, ooh, she's kind of cute, I could see myself being with her, but she's probably evil, so I have to shut her out, I can't like her. I think that's kind of what it was. So then when emotion came around, obviously he sensed that she was a Senti, he sensed the amok within her ring, so he realized he could trust her. And because he already had this crush on her, and he realized that he could trust her, that meant that he was okay with falling in love with her. So in that moment, the crush he had, the crush on her that he had formed in the episode Gabriel Agreste, made itself known. But anyway, that crush making itself known is why he was all of a sudden flirting with her in emotion. So yes, I do think that, the flirting stemmed from her being a Senti, but that's not where his feelings for her stemmed from, and that's not why he was choosing to flirt with her, if that makes sense. But anyway, also, in emotion, he was able to talk to her for the first time. He got to know a little bit more about her and her personality, her demeanor, her vibe, everything. Obviously, they still didn't really know anything, but he at least got to know her a little bit, and I think maybe that's when he realized that he really liked her. Really, really, really liked her. Hence why we got the episode Pretension. Because he was just so curious about who she was, and just I don't know, he just wanted to know more about her. He genuinely could not stop thinking about her. And that's basically something that he admitted to in Pretension. Ever since I met you, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Truly, I think she was the only thing he could think of. She just consumed his mind. And obviously that made him do some really weird things. Girl, why are you following her? Let's not do that. Okay, let's not do that. Anyway, but he was so desperate to just find anything about her, because she just consumed his mind. Emotion just really, really lit up that crush. So in conclusion, the moral of this story is that her being a Senti is what allowed him to fall for her, right? He has all of these walls up, and even though he may have liked her, those walls were still up. But him finding out that she was a Senti broke down those walls because he realized he could trust her. And because those walls were then broken down, Kagami could then be let in, right? And that is why he fell for her. Anyway, I rest my case. Also, I wanted to highlight the part where they said they don't fit well together. I have this picture of Gabriel. I discovered it the other day. The text says, me when I read this. It's my new favorite picture of Gabriel. If you guys are just listening to this, it's a picture of Gabriel, and he looks so, offended. He's, disgusted by what Adrian is saying. By the way, if you don't know, this comes from when Adrian suggested that him and Natalie were a thing and they were dating. That was his reaction. Oh my god, I love it. It's hilarious. Anyway, talking about that line more, I'll never understand that rhetoric. They fit together perfectly and flawlessly. Truly, if you look really deep into Kagami's character, what she wants specifically in a relationship, and you look at Felix and his character development, they perfectly mesh well together. They were destined to be together, in my opinion. Everything about Kagami was meant for Felix. Everything about Felix is meant for Kagami. And the more you look into their characters and just the ship in general, you'll really start to see that. So going back to yet another analogy, one that I like to kind of jock up Feligami to, envision them as a puzzle. And Kagami is this whole puzzle, right? It's a big puzzle, but there's just that one missing piece. So she has all of her pieces, she has everything together, but there's just a tiny little something that's missing. And you know, the puzzle piece is okay without it, but it just kind of looks weird not having, you know, that piece there. And to me, Felix is that tiny puzzle piece that's missing the whole puzzle. So when you look at it, a whole puzzle is missing a tiny little piece. But if you look at just the puzzle piece, you're like, oh, you're missing the whole puzzle. So it's like, Lukagami has her whole life, right? She has everything, but she's just missing that one tiny little thing. And that one tiny little thing is her person. And Felix is his own person, but he's just missing the rest of his world. It's like Lukagami's a bit more open, Felix is more sheltered, and Lukagami needs someone to kind of close the gap, and Felix needs someone to create a masterpiece, right? To kind of open up this whole entire world. So you put them together and bam, it's a masterpiece. Like, it's exactly what each other needed. And now Felix has this whole entire puzzle, this whole entire world, and Lukagami has her little world, that little puzzle piece. And it's just, it's so perfect and it's so flawless, and I just love that analogy because it's so cute too. At the end of the day, if you get one thing out of this video, it's that Feligami is a masterpiece. Moving on though, we're finally on to part 2.4, and we're also only 10 slides away, so we're getting down to the wire. So this part is called Kagami's feelings. So the next section of the comment says, and she only likes him because she feels bad for him / gets her anime romance with him. First of all, I definitely agree with the romance thing. However, what I will say about that is I just don't see how that's a problem. Like, if that's what she wants, if she wants that like anime romance, what's so wrong with having it? I don't see how that's a problem. Like, if she wants it, shouldn't she be able to get it? And if it's what she wants, that's what she deserves. Like, that's what she needs. I feel like that line is almost saying like, yeah, she wants Felix because she gets her romance, but she shouldn't have that romance because what she really needs is Luca. That's not that's not logical, right? If she wants her romance, let her have her romance. If she can have it, let her have it. There's nothing wrong with that. Also, another big part is like the whole she feels bad thing, and I just I don't agree, especially because I do know Kagami's character very well. Kagami would never date just anybody. Feligami isn't Kagami just jumping at the opportunity to be in a relationship. I think if that were the case, she wouldn't have told him off in the Eiffel Tower, and she wouldn't have thrown him on the ground later on in the episode. She would have been so accepting to be with Felix right instantly when he mentioned the fact that he liked her. She would have jumped at the opportunity, but she didn't. I mean, yeah, there were definitely some feelings that were stirring up in her, but do you think she cared? No. Like, she definitely started liking him back in the Eiffel Tower, yet she still told him off, and she still threw him onto the ground, being like, I don't need your help, I don't need you. And like I said, Kagami isn't one to just jump in any kind of relationship. That's not who she is. If somebody came up to her and they declared their love to her, she wouldn't instantly jump into the relationship. She would have to get to know them and actually like them before making any kind of decision. And also, I know for a fact that Kagami would never date anyone just because she felt bad for them. Like, in my head, she would literally say, sucks for you. I don't care. Don't get me wrong. Kagami has empathy, right? I'm not saying she doesn't. She can be empathetic. She can be sympathetic. But is she gonna date someone because of it? No. And she won't care. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you, but can you like go away now? Like, that's who she is. Especially if like it's someone she doesn't want to date or doesn't want to be with. If they're kind of coming to her being like, I want to date you and you should date me because of this, and that. Like, I've been hurt. Like, she would see right through that and she would not get with him. And like, Felix's tactic when getting with her wasn't to just make her feel bad for him, right? He wasn't like, hey, so my dad was really mean and this and that, so you should date me. That's not at all, right? He didn't even mention anything about that. I mean, he did say, and you've never met my father, he was 1,000 times worse, but that was specifically because they were talking about Mr. Rugi being a bad parent. Of course, he would kind of bring that up, but even then, he didn't even talk about what had happened to him. Nothing about his past was ever truly brought up. And yes, I know the sewer thing, he was talking about like the whole life thing, like you shouldn't manipulate them, blah blah blah, but at the end of the day, he was doing that once again because Kagami was like, why don't you just create a senti? He wasn't like, this is my life story and this is why you should date me. He was already like, you should date me because I like you and I know you and we're a lot alike. Like, that was literally him when he was trying to get her. That was his tactic. It had nothing to do with him trying to like garner empathy or sympathy from her. The whole senti thing had just been brought up, and so of course he was kind of talking about it, but even then he was still pretty vague about it. Like, he didn't say exactly what had happened. I think it was after the point that they had been dating that Kagami found out, you know, what his father had done to him. Logically, it does not make sense. The idea that she's only dating him because she feels bad for him just does not make sense at all. And once again, like I said, she would never date somebody because she felt bad for them. That's not who she is. Kagami's love stemmed from Felix's vulnerability and and his personality. She saw who he was, like who he truly was, and that's what made her fall for him and want to date him, right? Because like I said, I feel like she already kind of had a little bit of a crush on him at the beginning of Pretension, but she still wasn't going to let him date her, not in the slightest. But then she really saw who he was as a person, and she just saw that vulnerability, and she saw just how similar they were. And I think just like basically all of Pretension is just her slowly realizing that like Felix is her person. That's who she wants to be with, and that's who she should be with. Anyway, next slide. As I stated previously, the idea that Kagami had of Adrian was false. He's not that person, but a person with that personality does exist. Felix. It's Felix. That's his exact personality. As I also stated, Kagami has wishes and desires regarding how her relationship works. She wants her person to act and treat her in a certain way. Felix came into the picture and did exactly that. And that, my friends, is exactly why she fell for him. So just like with, Felix, I kind of want to go through the timeline of her feelings for him. So in emotion, Kagami was more in love with Adrian, quote unquote, than she ever had been. He was talking and acting and treating her just as she had always dreamed of. In lies, all she wanted was for Adrian to sneak off with her so they could spend time together alone, but he never did, and that's why she fell out of love with him. But in emotion, all of a sudden he was kind of proposing that they do exactly what she wanted in emotion, and that's definitely why her feelings came back. And listen, I know that her feelings for Adrian had already come back prior to that point, but like I said at the beginning, like, she was more in love with Adrian than she had ever been. And it was simply because he was doing all of the things that she wished he had done when they were dating. Also in emotion, she ends up finding out that Adrian was actually Felix. Essentially, she finds out that everything he said or did was fake because Felix was pretending to be someone he wasn't. She just realizes that everything this guy was doing and saying, first of all, wasn't Adrian, but she also realizes that it was Felix, and she also realizes that basically the way that she was being treated, like in emotion, she was being treated the way she always wanted to, right? But when she found out it was Felix, she must have realized that all of it was fake. The way he was treating her, the way he was talking to her, like none of it was real. He was just, playing some kind of facade to pretend to be Adrian, to make it realistic. We obviously know that that's not the case. I mean, I'll get into this later, but that's exactly what she realizes in Pretension. But first of all, I wanted to talk about like a little mini theory, just like kind of how we did with the Felix thing, the timeline. So my theory is specifically that Kagami was so upset not only because Felix had snapped her mom out of existence, but because she had fallen in love with him. So Adrian turns out to be Felix, and he's just snapping everyone out of existence left and right, and eventually he snaps Kagami's mom out of existence, and she's like, no! And then basically like right after that happens, he leaves with Marinette, and she, walks over to like the big hole where Felix had just jumped out of, and she drops to the ground and she puts her hand on her heart and she's crying. She's obviously crying because her mom is gone, but I feel like more of it, now this is just my opinion, my theory, more of that reaction came from the fact that she had fallen in love with him. I feel like she just felt so betrayed because first of all, it wasn't Adrian, but also this guy who was pretending to be Adrian, she had fallen in love with him, so in love with him, more than she had ever been in love with anyone. And the fact that he wasn't who he said he was kind of indicates the fact that what he was saying was just a lie. It was just some kind of facade. So the way that he was treating her, the way he was talking, like none of it was real. And that's like why she liked him, right? So to find out that it was fake, like there's this level of betrayal. And also her reaction when she was fighting Felix does kind of remind me of when she fought Adrian in Lies. So she was in love with him, and then, the relationship got messed up, and she was just so angry at him for messing up the relationship that she kind of goes a little crazy when they were fencing. And I think, the way she was acting when she was fencing, it kind of came from a place that was like, how could I let myself fall in love with you and get hurt? How could I allow myself to like you just for you to hurt me? I just feel like genuinely, it just gave the same vibes in emotion. It just feels like the motivation for that was like, I fell in love with you and you betrayed me. Like I said, she could have just been fighting Felix, and she could have just been upset because he had snapped her mom out of existence, which was definitely a big part of it, but I personally just feel like that does kind of play a role in the way she was acting. Anyway, theory aside, going back to the timeline, moving on to Pretension specifically, the episode is her realizing that the way Felix was treating her was real. The flirting was real, him wanting to run away with her was real, right? Because like I said, in emotion, when he became Felix and Argos and became the evil guy, she realized that, or not realized, but she thought that, you know, the way that he was acting around her had to have been fake too. So she thought all of the flirting and him wanting to run away, like all of that was just fake, him just pretending to be Adrian. But based off the way that he was treating her and acting in this episode, made her realize that he was being truthful, he was being genuine when he was acting that way and when he was talking that way. I think this episode is also when she realized she had been going after the wrong guy, because like I said, she had this false idea of who Adrian is, and I think in this episode she realized that who she was in love with wasn't really Adrian, instead it was Felix. Like, Felix is the exact guy that she thought Adrian was. All the qualities, all the characteristics, like literally everything she ever wanted out of Adrian was right there in Felix, and she definitely realized that in Pretension. Also, as I mentioned, Felix was very soft and very vulnerable with her in this episode, which, like, side note, is something that he's never really showed to anyone before, which is really cute. She saw him for who he really is, and she also saw how similar they were. Another point is that she definitely saw something in him that other people don't. Like, just because he was being so open and vulnerable with her, she was able to just see him in a way that no one else has been able to. And I really truly believe that that right there, like everything we have listed, is why she fell in love with him. Once again, as I said, when you really take a look at Kagami's character and Kagami's development and what she wants in a relationship, you'll realize just how perfect and curated Feligami is. It's not random. Like I said, at the very beginning, a lot of people said, oh, Feligami is so random, it's stupid, or Feligami is so random, but it works. That's not true. So I can say with full confidence that feeling bad for him is not in the slightest one of the reasons why she's dating him. Not even in the realm of things. She may feel bad for him, she may feel sympathy for him, but that's not why she's dating him. She would never. Okay. We are finally so close to being done, guys. We're on the very last part. This is 2.5 Felix. So we're on the very last bit of this comment. Specifically, they say in the comment, plus he was also isolated a lot growing up and hates the world, so not the right person for Kagami. And one thing that I want to make very, very clear here, Felix used to. Emphasis on used to. That is the most important point. He's changed/changing. Season 5 makes this clear, specifically the end of season 5. I mean, the whole, everything about Felix in season 5 is kind of like portraying that change and that development, or like leading up to it, but specifically episodes like Pretension and Representation really, really make that clear that he's changed and changing. And I would argue that the end of Emotion is really what sets the fact that he's at least going to change. Anyway, season 6 will most likely establish more of his development. So, I mean, yes, he's kind of had his redemption arc, but also we're barely there, right? He's still having his redemption arc, and he's still, growing and changing as a person and as a character, right? They're not just gonna have that done in like just a couple episodes. Like, season 6 is definitely going to talk a lot more about his development. Like, we're still diving into that. Felix still has a lot of room to change, and I think season 6 is definitely going to highlight that and definitely establish more of that. He might have hated the world at some point, but that is not true. Like, he does not hate the world anymore. He's slowly working through trauma and is finally getting to a point where he can trust people and actually allow them into his life. Honestly, in my opinion, at the end of Emotion is when he stopped hating the world and he stopped blocking people out. And we see that so obvious because Pretension literally shows him being such a happy little golden retriever, right? He doesn't seem angry, he doesn't seem mad at the world at all, and he's obviously allowing Kagami into his life and accepting her and wanting her to be in it. So I think that's proof right there that that's just not true. Also, another point about season 6 in terms of this is that I think this season will see him making a lot more friends and just kind of building up his support system. Like, he's definitely been accepted into the friend group, and we know that's the case because at the end of season 5 they had a pool party and Felix was very much there. We didn't really see him interacting with anyone besides Kagami. Not that he was necessarily interacting with Kagami either. They looked at each other and they smiled, as you can see in the picture right here, but he was there, so he must have been hanging out with them a little bit. And we saw him, a part of the hero group at the end of season 5 and then also in season 6. His 2-second cameo in Revelator. Anyway, yeah, I think just like in general, he's always leaned so much on Kagami for like development and stuff. And I think now he's getting to a point where he's going to allow more friends to come into his circle. And so it's not just going to be Kagami aiding him in his development. It's going to be other people. There's going to be friends and things. Anyway, with that being said, that leads us to our conclusion. And my conclusion is that Felix and Kagami are perfect for each other. Based on everything we know and have learned about their characters, we know that this is the case. Kagami is the only one Felix could and would love. Felix is truly the only person who fits everything Kagami needs and wants. Luka is not what she wants. He wouldn't be able to love and care for her in the way that she wants. Nothing about him is similar to the kind of guy she wants. I agree that Luka probably wants someone opposite to him, but I think Kagami is a little too different, a little too opposite. Their lives and their desires are too conflicting, and that's something I kind of talked about when I was kind of talking about like Luke and Annette and how they're opposites, but Kagami's like way farther on the other end. You know, some people who are opposites just are not meant for a relationship, and to me that is Kagami and Luka. Kagami needs someone and wants someone who is just like her, and Felix fits that description. So I guess kind of going back to the whole like logical thing, I think based off of everything we've talked about in this episode about, you know, Kagami's character and Felix's character, because essentially that's what we were diving into in this episode. We were diving into their characters and like just the deep roots of why they're together. And I think when the writers were coming up with Feligami, they knew that and they saw that. They were looking deep into their characters and their character development. And that is exactly, you know, why it was logical for Feligami to end up together and for Lukagami to not end up together. So that answers our question. Why Felix was picked over Luka? Why Feligami is canon over Lukagami? Because it makes sense. And based off of everything I've told you in this episode, we know why it makes sense. Hopefully you guys understand and can make the connection of why it makes sense. But with that being said, like I was talking about in the podcast episode, the podcast updates section, I do have a little like assignment thingy for you guys today for this podcast episode. So your first assignment or first part of this assignment is to answer the questions given in the podcast updates section. So you had two things you needed to answer. The first thing was the name for you guys, the viewer name, and then the second one was just like the assignments tests thing. If you guys need to go back, I know we've been talking for a really long time, so if you need to go back to that section, like I said, this video is split into chapters, so you can just quickly access that section and you can like re-go over that whole thing. But yeah, you guys will answer those two things. And then also, this is more like assignment. Like in a paragraph, minimum of 3 sentences, I want you guys to give your opinions on Lukagami and Feligami. You're going to discuss this in the comments. Also, in this paragraph, I want you to provide a summary of something you learned or liked about today's class. So, you know, maybe you didn't know something about Kagami's development, or you didn't know something about Felix's development, or there was a part of Feligami that you didn't know or didn't understand. I just want you guys to like discuss that, and also, yeah, just talk about like what you learned and how you learned, or if you kind of knew everything, you could just talk about what you liked. I just feel like talking about what you learned or what you've heard helps you understand things better. And if there's one thing I want you to understand more than anything in the world, it's Feligami. So yeah, just kind of like write out your thoughts, and like maybe if you made like bullet points throughout. I know some people have said they've gotten their notebooks out and they're like writing notes as I'm talking. Literally love that. So if you've done that, you can just kind of take your notes and write a little paragraph about what you've learned and like the points you made, or just like what you liked about this. And as always, if you guys have any questions about any of the topics we went over, you can also list them in your paragraph as well. I tried to go over everything like pretty in detail. I think I went over all of the points, but obviously maybe some people might need a little bit of clarity, or, you know, just because it makes sense in my head doesn't mean it makes sense in everyone else's head. So yeah, if you come out of this podcast episode with any questions, also feel free to let me know. You can let me know in your comment, either in your paragraph or like maybe like after you're done writing your paragraph. But yeah, with that being said, that is basically the end of class. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching and for listening listening to this episode. I hope you learned a thing or two, or I hope your perspective on some things have changed. Like I said, if you like Lukagami and if you ship them, that's totally fine. Like, I really do not care. I just wanted, once again, to explain to you guys from like the writer's perspective or whatever, why exactly Feligami was chosen. So I hope at least after this episode, if you like Lukagami, you're at least not mad anymore that Feligami is a thing and you understand why it works. But with that being said, it's time to go. It's time to go. Bye guys. I hope to see you guys soon. Hopefully you enjoyed this class. I will see you next period with a new episode. I actually don't know what we're talking about next week, but you'll know when you get to class, okay?